Namaste. Today, I'm going to tell you about the story of King Janaka and Yajnavalkya from the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, one of the oldest and most revered Hindu scriptures. This story is about a dialogue between a wise and virtuous king and a renowned and respected sage, who discuss the nature of the self, the supreme self, and the state of liberation. The story begins with King Janaka, who was a wise and virtuous ruler, as well as a seeker of the highest knowledge. He decided to conduct a grand sacrifice and invited many learned sages and scholars to participate. He also announced a challenge: whoever could answer his questions on the self and the supreme self would be rewarded with 1,000 cows, each with a gold coin tied to its horns. Many sages tried to answer his questions, but none could satisfy him. Finally, he asked Yajnavalkya, who was the most renowned and respected sage of his time, to answer his questions. Yajnavalkya agreed and asked his disciple to drive the cows away, implying that he was confident of winning the challenge. King Janaka was surprised and asked him, "Do you think that you know the self and the supreme self?" Yajnavalkya replied, "I do not think that I know them, nor do I think that I do not know them. I know what can be known by the self, and I know what cannot be known by the self." King Janaka was intrigued and asked him to explain further. Yajnavalkya said, "The self is the innermost essence of all beings, the witness of all experiences, and the controller of all powers. The self is beyond the body, the senses, the mind, and the intellect, and it is not affected by birth, death, or change. The self is identical to the supreme self, which is the absolute reality, the source of all existence, and the bliss of all bliss. The supreme self is beyond name, form, and attributes, and it is not limited by time, space, or causation. The supreme self is the only reality, and everything else is an illusion." King Janaka was amazed and asked him, "How can one realize the self and the supreme self?" Yajnavalkya said, "One can realize the self and the supreme self by the grace of a guru, a teacher who has experienced them himself. The guru teaches the disciple the method of discrimination, which is to separate the real from the unreal, the eternal from the temporal, and the self from the not-self. The guru also teaches the disciple the method of meditation, which is to focus the mind on the self and the supreme self, and to detach from all worldly attachments and distractions. The guru also teaches the disciple the method of devotion, which is to surrender to the supreme self and to love the supreme self as one's own self. By these methods, the disciple gradually attains the state of liberation, which is the state of oneness with the self and the supreme self, and the state of freedom from all bondage and suffering." King Janaka was delighted and asked him, "What is the nature of the state of liberation?" Yajnavalkya said, "The state of liberation is the state of supreme peace, joy, and wisdom. It is the state of being aware of one's true nature, and being free from all ignorance and delusion. It is the state of being independent of all external conditions, and being content with one's own self. It is the state of being beyond all duality, and being one with all existence. It is the state of being the self and the supreme self, and being nothing else." King Janaka was satisfied and praised Yajnavalkya for his answers. He awarded him the 1,000 cows and honored him as the best among the sages. He also requested him to be his guru and teach him the way to liberation. Yajnavalkya agreed and initiated him into the highest knowledge. King Janaka became his disciple and followed his teachings. He continued to rule his kingdom with justice and righteousness, but he was not attached to his wealth, power, or fame. He was always detached, calm, and serene, and he realized the self and the supreme self within himself. He attained the state of liberation while living, and he became an example of a perfect king and a perfect sage. This is the end of the story of King Janaka and Yajnavalkya from the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something from it. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel for more videos on ancient Indian stories and wisdom. Thank you for watching, and Namaste.